His demonstration was bad. There's no other way to put it. Okay. His complex interview was bad. This interview was also bad. There's no locking in. He can't lock in any further. He's locked. His mind is locked. And it's not just him slurring. It's not just the stutter. He's just having a very hard time crafting coherent sentences. Okay, let's do the good liars. There's also a snippet from the interview that is going to be released in 30 minutes. The Brandon interview will be out in 30 minutes. This is another exclusive snippet from the Brandon interview that is going to be out in 30 minutes with Lester Holt. We're going to be watching that when it comes out, but let's take a look.
Sitting down with us, there's a lot to talk about. I'd like to start with the horrible events of last weekend. It has shocked a lot of Americans. A political rally, your opponent, Donald Trump, shot in the middle of greeting his supporters. You spoke to Mr. Trump afterward. Can you give me a sense of that conversation?
Very cordial. I told him how concerned I was and wanted to make sure I knew how he was actually doing. He sounded good. He said he was fine. And he thanked me for calling him. I told him he was literally in the prayers of Jill and me. And I hope his whole family was weathering this.
Well, let's talk about the conversation this has started. And it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential.
I hate the media so much. Oh my God, I hate them. I hate them so much. I hate them almost as much as I hate the Republican Party. They are doing the bidding of the Republican Party. I hate everyone involved in this. I hate Joe Biden. I despise the media. They took right-wing framing immediately and went, do you think your rhetoric contributed to Donald Trump getting shot? What rhetoric?
Does him pants on a
the
stage.
shooter is a Republican, and his rhetoric about Trump is that like he's a bad guy. Okay, he's running against him. Of course, he's supposed to say he's a bad guy, and half of the shit that he says about Donald Trump is perfectly valid anyway. What are you doing? Be for real. Like, what are you, Ben Shapiro? Are you Ben Shapiro? Why are you using Ben Shapiro's framing on the matter? Like, that is unimaginably disingenuous. What? Oh, man, I can't believe you would call him a convicted felon, which he is. Or, oh, man, I can't believe you say he'd be a dictator, which he said he would be. What the? Is there any evidence that the shooter was even intending to shoot Trump for political reasons? That is just nihilistic school shooter fame. Honestly, it makes sense because most of the time, school shooter fames just you shoot up the school. This is one of the few instances. That is actually another issue that has been like in my head this entire time. And it's like we talk about school shooting as like tragic incidents, but like all those school shootings happen so frequently. And obviously people make a much bigger fuss about the president being attacked, about the president being shot at, but like we're in America. You know what I mean? Shootings happen all the time. It is actually shocking that more politicians have not been victim to like some lone wolf weirdo who wants to make a name for themselves. You know what I mean? I just don't understand how like people act like this is a shocking scenario when like what's truly shocking is that there is so much gun violence in this country as a consequence of unrestricted access to weapons. There are more weapons on the streets than there are people in this country. And the fact that it doesn't happen more frequently to like notable politicians and shit is the shocking reality, not vice versa.
Threat on a call a week ago, you said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term was bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing.
To explain what that means. Everyone knows. Everyone uses that phrase all the time.
Also, it was literally in a private, closed-door meeting to donors. Do you think that like the CEO of Halliburton was like, "That's right, I heard what Biden said, and I'm gonna go out and shoot Donald Trump in the head"? Like, is that what you think was going on there? Like, Republicans have literally put crosshairs on active politicians that have then been shot. Okay. Like we talked about this yesterday with Gabby Giffords. There was a Republican who was like, what was the narrative where they were like, get Gabby Giffords out. shoot this M16 automatic weapon. That was like one of the campaign slogans. And then someone did shoot Gabby Giffords. So like the idea that this is like Brandon having a closed door meeting with donors where he uses a term or phrase that's like, that just means like we got to put him in the crosshairs, like we got to focus on him, is so crazy. It's not even Sarah Palin that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the other politician apparently that said that. No, Sarah Palin put crosshairs on all of the seats that they want to take out. But that's not as offensive in my opinion as like literally saying we got to take Gabby Giffords out, shoot this automatic rifle. Okay, that's insane.
On his policies, focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that look. I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win.
Mr. President, you've been in politics a very long time, so let's speak frankly. We're all adults here. Has this shooting changed the trajectory of this race?
Bro, he's so bad. Goddamn, he's so bad.
I don't know, and you don't know either.
I won't be shocked when his Twitch account is a sub here. You think the registered Republican that shot Donald Trump is a subscriber of mine? The registered Republican? If he's a subscriber, it's so that he can avoid the top of the hour ad breaks so we can hate better, okay? So we can avoid the middle of the hour ad breaks that is a secret that's only a minute long, so we can be a better hate watcher, so we can actually clip my because only subscribers can clip.
Get me every time with these ad breaks.
I don't know, but something you've given thought to?
No, I've thought less about the trajectory of the case than two things. One, what his health is, that was secure, number one. And number two, what happens from here on in terms of the kind of coverage that the president and vice president and former president and new vice president get in terms of, look, I've never seen a circumstance where you ride through certain rural areas of the country.
That was a helpful cut. They gave him a helpful edit right there. Camera change.
I wonder what he kept saying.
I want to know how long
Vice
that
president,
was.
the president's wife, and second
Look,
president, double vice.
I've never seen a circumstance.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is crazy. Okay, dude. Dick riding of this magnitude should be illegal, okay? You can't do that. That I feel like is unironically like against the public interest. Like you are a media, you are a media network. You can't be carrying this much water.
The president and vice president and former president and new vice president get in terms of, look, I've never seen a circumstance where you ride through certain rural areas of the country and people have signs there, big Trump signs with middle signs saying F Biden and a little kid standing there putting up his middle finger. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is just inflammatory and the kind of viciousness. It's a very different thing than to say,
Also, he's
look,
like a
I
gun
really
control
disagree
guy,
with Trump's
right? Surely this
the
is
way
his
he
time to
takes
shine.
care of taxes, the way he...
Like that's the most confusing bit.
Yeah, just just stick to message. Talk about gun control. If you're going to talk about messaging and rhetoric, be like, what kind of conversation are we having? You will never be able to find me with like genuine violent rhetoric. Republicans have a monopoly on both political violence and Republicans have a monopoly on violent rhetoric. There are polls conducted on this matter. Republicans outperform Democratic voters by wide margins in terms of justifying violence. Republicans are a inherently violent party. Their policy positions are violent. Okay? Donald Trump has posted a video on his Truth Social account with me, Joseph Robinette Biden, in the back of a pickup truck, hogtied. Okay? What are we even talking about? There is nothing that even comes near in any actual Democratic Party politician that has ever been anywhere near as remotely as violent as the average Republican as the average Republican elected representative is on a daily basis. Okay? Just say that. Just be like, what are we talking about? If words are violence, was a real metric that the Republican Party abided by, then they would have to all disgracefully resign for any number of different violent things that they have said. Okay? Yeah, Kathy Griffin is a great example. Thank you so much for bringing up Kathy Griffin. You know, California District 13 elected representative Kathy Griffin. What are you talking about, Kathy Griffin? Kathy Griffin is not a politician, dumbass. Do you know what Republicans do? Do you know what Republican celebrities do in terms of like their violent rhetoric? Kathy Griffin is a dumbass comedian. If we're going to talk about Kathy Griffin, holy dude, Ted Nugent is literally a child, okay, who has said unimaginably unhinged Barack Obama, about Joe Biden, about every Democrat. What the fuck? Kathy Griffin. Kid Rock. Yeah, John Voight calls for killing all the time. Like, it's so funny. The handful of Republican celebrities are mostly just known for being insanely violent. This is before we even talk about the regular Republican voters, okay? It's just ridiculous.
It's also such a distraction. Like the stochastic terrorism thing is just not applicable. Like it's
not.
Even having to have that argument is like misdirection.
Yeah, remember when he got canceled for calling out Tom Cotton for calling the death of protesters via car? Yeah, that's a great analogy. I didn't even do nothing. I just posted a meme on a Tom Cotton tweet where he actively called for Americans to kill protesters. And it wasn't the first time he did that. And everybody was like, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe you've said such an unimaginable thing. I can't believe you. This is so violent. You're such a bad guy. And it's like, bro, do you not see what I quote retweeted? Do you not see what I quote retweeted? He is a sitting senator in the Republican Party actively calling to kill protesters for exercising their First Amendment rights. Okay? It's nuts. So there is no equivalence on the matter. And I am far from the average Democrat regardless. Okay? I've said a number of different things that are unimaginably unhinged. I am not a representation of the Democratic Party. I'm not even a representation of the Democratic Party's voter base. I openly say I'm not going to vote for this demon. Okay? What Democrat you know operates like that?
Good evening and welcome to our special
it's time,
coverage.
folks.
We're live at the White House, where earlier today I sat down for an exclusive one-on-one interview with President Biden. During our conversation, the president called on all Americans to tone down the heated rhetoric in the wake of the assassination attempt on former President Trump at a rally over the weekend. But he also doubled down on staying in the presidential race himself, despite calls from within his party to step aside. Our interview comes as Republicans kick off the first night of their convention in Milwaukee, formally making Mr. Trump their nominee to be the next president. We'll have full coverage led by my colleague Savannah Guthrie from the Convention Center after our interview with the president. But earlier today, I started by asking President Biden about his phone call with Mr. Trump after the assassination attempt. Here's our unedited conversation in its entirety.
Mr. President, thank you for sitting down with us. There's a lot to talk about. I'd like to start with the horrible events of last weekend. It has shocked a lot of Americans. A political rally, your opponent, Donald Trump, shot in the middle of greeting his supporters. You spoke to Mr. Trump afterward. Can you give me a sense of that conversation?
Very cordial. I told him how concerned I was and wanted to make sure I knew how he was actually doing. He sounded good. He said he was fine. And he thanked me for calling him. I told him he was literally in the prayers of Jill and me. And I hope his whole family was weathering this.
You were in Delaware when this happened. What was your first reaction?
My first reaction was, my God, this is, look, there's so much violence now, the way we talk about it. I mean, the whole notion that there is this, there's no place at all for violence in politics in America. None. Zero. And we've reached a point where it's become too commonplace, not assassinations, but to talk about it. For example, you know, the January 6th, you know, the attack on the Capitol. Lester, I got in this race early on in 2020 for the 2020 race. I wasn't going to run again because I lost my
Oh
son.
my God, he restarted.
And
He rebooted.
until I watched what happened in
He
Charlottesville,
rebooted back to the
Virginia.
Charlottesville
Those folks
shit.
coming out of the woods with torches, carrying swastikas, singing the same Nazi bile. It was accompanied by this Ku Klux Klan, and a young woman was killed. And it was a bystander. And the then president was asked, what do you think? He said, they're very fine people on both sides. Not fine people on both sides. No excuse, zero.
Well, let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that
I didn't say
words matter.
crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that won't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying, and I mean, the idea.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says? Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I have not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses, talking about how he's going to forgive all the, actually, I guess, suspend the sentences of all those who were arrested and sentenced to go to jail because of what happened in the Capitol. I'm not out there making fun of, like, remember the picture of Donald Trump when Nancy Pelosi's husband was hit with a hammer, joking about it.
This doesn't sound like you're turning down the heat, though. You've talked about
no,
the need.
No. Look, what I'm turning down, we have to stop the whole notion that there are certain things that are contrary to our democracy that we're for. The idea of saying that I didn't win the election, when every court in the land, I don't know, 20 appeals said, and including this conservative Supreme Court, said we won. The idea of
At this point, you need like a guide to understand exactly what he means. You need to be so tuned into politics to know what he's saying. I think the average voter watches this and goes, "What is going on?"
And what will you do? At least things you can control to lower down the temperature, the rhetoric out there.
Continue to talk about the things that matter to the American public. It matters whether or not you accept the outcome of elections. It matters whether or not you, for example, talk about how you're going to deal with the border instead of talking about people as being vermin. And I mean, those things matter. That's the kind of language that is inflammatory.
Mr. President, you've been in politics a very long time, so let's speak frankly. We're all adults here. Has this shooting changed the trajectory of this race?
I don't know, and you don't know either.
I don't know, but something you've given thought to?
No, I've thought less about the trajectory of the case than two things. One, what his health is, that was secure, number one. And number two, what happens from here on in terms of the kind of coverage that the president and vice president and former president and new vice president get in terms of, look, I've never seen a circumstance where you ride through certain rural areas of the country and people have signs there, big Trump signs with middle signs saying F Biden, and a little kid standing there putting up his middle finger. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is just inflammatory, and kind of viciousness. It's a very different thing than to say, look, I really disagree with the way he takes care of taxes, the way he wants a $5 trillion tax cut for people who are making a lot of money next time
he's
around.
right.
Doesn't focus on
and he's
working
trying to
class
make a
people.
coherent point,
Issues,
and his
we-
delivery
our
is
history
so
is
god-awful.
a country that can thoroughly hash out those issues.
And if you notice, what do I talk about with him? The policy issues where he's dividing the country, the policy issues that relate to democracy.
Another question, if I can, about Saturday. Of course, the former president was wounded. One of his supporters died. A couple more people were seriously injured. Was this a massive security failure?
I have had 2 meetings in the Situation Room with all the intelligence communities, the FBI, Secret Service, et cetera, and I've asked for a totally independent analysis, and we'll see what happens when that comes back.
Do you have confidence in the Secret Service? Do you feel safe?
I feel safe with the Secret Service, but look, and you saw what we did see was the Secret Service who responded risked their lives in responding. They're ready to give their lives to the president. The question is, should they have anticipated what happened? Should they have done what they needed to do to prevent this from happening? That's a question that's an open question.
Is it acceptable that you have still not heard, at least publicly, from the Secret Service director?
Well, I've heard from them.
But have you heard from her publicly?
Publicly, I've sat down in a Situation Room downstairs with the Secret Service, the FBI.
No,
the
he
security
means
agencies,
do you think it's acceptable they haven't released a public statement?
elements. And there's 2 pieces of this too. And it's not an excuse, it's just an explanation.
Oh,
There's
he
a
didn't understand
major
the
piece of this
question.
relates to domestic, local law enforcement. They play a large role. And so it's a different I'm not saying they weren't competent either. I'm just saying it's a complicated process. And what has changed, by the way, Lester, is, you know me, I like to meet people. I like to walk out, shake hands, move, look at people in the eye, see what they're thinking. It's really curtailed that ability on my part and everybody's part. And so, because there's a heightened notion that when you say there's nothing wrong with going to the Capitol, breaking in, threatening people, a couple cops dying, hanging up, putting up a noose, a gallows for the former vice president, and somehow and then you say you're going to forgive people for that, you're going to pardon them, that was just a normal response. That is not. I have my entire career voted against and railed against and moved against the idea of violence is never appropriate. Never, 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 never in politics.
All right, I want to ask you about some other developing news today, if I can. Judge Cannon dismissed the documents case, as you may have heard, in Mar-a-Lago. Can I first get your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. It comes from the immunity decision the Supreme Court ruled on, and Clarence Thomas, in his dissent, said that independent prosecutors appointed by the Attorney General aren't legit. That's the basis on which this judge moved to dismiss. And, but I had an independent prosecutor look at me. They spent months on my going through, and I was totally cooperative in and out of my house. And there were, I don't know, the last time in, there were like 10, 12 agents in my house for 9 hours unaccompanied, going through every single thing I had. That's appropriate. And they looked at me and concluded I didn't do a damn thing wrong. But my generic point is that it's, well, the basis upon which the case was thrown out, I find specious because I don't agree with Clarence Thomas' dissent and or the Supreme Court decision on immunity.
In light of this decision, the delay in the Georgia case, the Supreme Court decision on immunity, which you referenced, the former president has seen a series of legal wins recently. You have actively campaigned on his legal woes. Can you do anything like that anymore?
Well, sure. I can talk about what I think is appropriate. What I think is appropriate. I think the Supreme Court made a terrible decision. I think the justices he appointed have, in fact, been the most conservative. And I would argue, if you survey constitutional scholarship, they seem out of touch with what the founders intended.
Before this violent turn of events over the weekend, the talk, as you know, was about you and your future, if you should stay in the race. Your allies, James Clyburn, Nancy Pelosi, have kind of put it out there that they're waiting for your decision, giving you time to make your decision. What I hear from you is that you made your decision. Are you still comfortable in that decision? Has anything changed in the last several days?
No.
What do you make of people like Nancy Pelosi, though, who seem to be of the opinion that there is a window for you to make this choice? What aren't they getting?
That's a good question.
Look, we knew this was going to be a close race from the moment he announced.
No.
The idea that we are in a situation where, if you look at all the polling data shows a lot of different things, but there's no wide gap between us. It's essentially a toss-up race. And I think one of the arguments that get made, you have the most successful presidency of any president in modern history, maybe since Franklin Roosevelt. Passed more major legislation no one thought could get done. We're able to put together consensus. We're able to unite NATO. We're able to deal with foreign policy. Why don't you just decide to rest on
Nobody cares about NATO, dude. Oh my God, you're a dumbass.
Because the job's not finished.
You're a dumbass.
Do you feel
You're
like
dumb.
you've weathered the storm on this issue of whether you should be on the ticket or not?
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listened to them.
That's a terrible argument.
In your last TV interview, you were asked if you had watched the debate, and your answer was, I don't think so, no. Have you since seen it?
I've seen pieces of it. I've not watched the whole debate.
And the reason I ask, because I guess the question is, are you all on the same page? Are you seeing what they saw, which was moments of, frankly, that appeared to be, you appeared to be confused?
Lester, look, why don't you guys ever talk about the 28 lies he told? Where are you on this? Why didn't the press ever talk about that? 28 times it's confirmed he lied in that debate. I had a bad, bad night. I wasn't feeling well at all. And I had been, without it making it, I screwed up. But
I just
having
asked
a
the
bad
question
night
because the idea that you may
Good
or
thing
may
he's having
not
a good
have
night
seen
now. Sorry.
what some of these other folks have seen, you're not on the same.
I'd have to see. I was there. I'd have to see it. I was there. And by the way, seriously, you won't answer the question, but why didn't the press talk about all the lies he told?
Well,
I haven't heard anything about that.
We have reported many of the issues that
No,
came up
you
during
haven't.
that debate.
No, you haven't.
We'll provide you with them.
God love you.
Okay. President Obama put out a statement after the debate, but should he and Michelle Obama be doing more to express their confidence in you?
No, they're helping me. They've helped me from the beginning. This is my job to get this done.
Have you talked to him recently about this?
I haven't talked to him in a couple weeks.
Have you talked to him since this issue came to light, since the debate?
I don't think, I may have. I don't think so.
Who do you listen to on deeply personal issues, like the decisions whether to stay in the race or not?
Me. Look, I've been doing this a long time. The idea that I'm the old guy, I am. I'm old. But I'm only 3 years older than Trump, number one. And number two, my mental acuity's been pretty damn good. I've gotten more done than any president has in a long, long time, in 3.5 years. So I'm willing to be judged on that. I understand why people say, God, he's 81 years old. Whoa, what's he going to be when he's 83 years old or 84 years old? It's a legitimate question to ask.
I want to ask you about, just shortly before you and I sat down, former President Trump named his vice presidential pick, J.D. Vance. What does that tell you, his qualities, what does that tell you about former President Trump's values in terms of who he will surround himself with in a next administration should he win?
Well, it's not unusual. He's going to surround himself with people who agree completely with him. Have a voting record. I support him. Even though if you go back and listen to the things that J.D. Vance said about Trump.
Well, he said some things about you, yeah.
Oh, no, well, he said something about me, but see what he said about Trump. What's with you guys? Come on, man. Look, the point I'm making is that J.D. Vance has adopted the same policies, no exceptions on abortion, making sure that he supports the new $5 trillion tax cut that Trump wants to give in the next administration, signing on to the whole notion of whether or not we're going to, he says there's no climate change happening. I mean, he signed on to the Trump agenda, which he should if he's running with Trump.
Mr. Trump has said he's giving you a chance to redeem yourself, basically the idea of engaging in another debate.
We're going to have another debate.
Yeah, you're going to have one in September that's on the books. Would you be open to doing one in the next few weeks?
I'm going to debate him when we agreed to debate, and I'm going to debate him in September.
But if the opportunity came up to do one between now and then, is there a sense of wanting to get back on the horse?
I'm on the horse. Where have you been? I've done 22 major events, met thousands of people, overwhelming crowds, a lot happening. I'm on the horse. What I'm doing is going out and demonstrating to the American people that I have command of all my faculties, that I don't need notes, I don't need teleprompter. I can go out and answer any questions at all. And I stood there when NATO was in town. I stood there for an hour and answered questions.
If you were to continue to run and be officially nominated, what happens if you have another episode like we saw during the debate?
What happens if another?
Yeah, what happens if you have another performance on that on that level?
I don't plan on having another performance on that level.
All right. Mr. President, it's always good to talk to you, good to see you. Thank you for making some time for us.
Sometimes come and talk to me about what we should be talking about.
All right.
Okay, the issues.
Always happy to talk.
That was our unedited conversation with President Biden. We should note we extended the same interview offer to Mr. Trump to sit down with us on the first night of the Democratic National Convention when it happens next month. For now, let me bring in my colleague Savannah Guthrie in Milwaukee with more of our coverage of both our interview and night one of the Republican National.
Overall, my immediate assessment of the interview is that the media loves to do actual journalism when they see someone is getting weak, and then there's a narrative set in the media against said narrative. Sometimes it's valid. Biden's senility is a valid target. Other times it's not valid. Like, for example, taking the right-wing framing on political rhetoric leading to violence on the Democratic front. Stochastic terror is very real. It's very real and conducted almost every single time by the right. Right-wing political rhetoric is unimaginably violent. Right-wing legislative agenda is unimaginably violent. Right-wing politicians are also very violent with the terms that they use, in the way that they make fun of and minimize the victims of violence, in the way that they openly demand violence. The fact that you could turn around and tell this tepid, middle-of-the-ground, neoliberal, centrist cadaver that his private closed-door meeting with donors where he said, we got to put Trump in the bullseye, like reframe the conversation around Donald Trump, using that colloquialism as like somehow leading to a registered Republican attempting to kill Donald Trump is insane, okay? You are not a serious person. You are not a serious person when you do that. You are a charlatan. You are trying to present yourself. You see the blood in the water, and you're trying to present yourself as a centrist and an unbiased arbiter of information when you are being unimaginably biased, okay? I hate that shit. I absolutely hate that. Now, even in that contentious conversation, an apt, decent orator is going to be able to run circles around that narrative because it's such a demonstrable hypocrisy, okay? It is such an unimaginable double standard. Like, it's so glaringly obvious for anyone with eyes to see that, like, if we're talking about words or violence, we have to literally lock up every elected Republican representative pretty much, okay? Every single one. That's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. It's completely beyond reason. Now, having said that, the unfortunate reality is Biden is not that guy. He's not. He showed it once again. He can't do it. He tried, and the only people who would be able to understand what he's saying in those moments are people like us who are, unfortunately, very autistically hyperfixated on politics even when it's on its off times, even when it's, popping off. We are dialed in. We're lasered in. We know what Biden is saying. We know what the Democratic Party's messaging is on this. Half the time, I know exactly what the questioning is going to be, what the talking points are from the Democratic side, from the Republican side, from the media. And if you know that, then yeah, you can make sense of what Biden is saying. But if you're an average voter that's tuning in just now on NBC News to see the mother president, okay, the mother president speak to Lester Holt, you're going to be shocked at his demonstration, okay? His demonstration was ass. It was bad. There's no other way to put it, okay? His complex interview was bad. This interview was also bad. There's no locking in. He can't lock in any further. He's locked. His mind is locked. And it's not just him slurring. It's not just the stutter. He's just having a very hard time crafting coherent sentences, okay? That's just the reality. And right now, with this timing, should Sotomayor resign? Why? She's not even that old. What are we talking about? How old is Sotomayor? I don't think she's that old. Yeah, she's 70. She's literally the second youngest Supreme Court justice, or third youngest, I think. Anyway, first off, dumbass is on X. He's seen yelling at Trump supporters. Are you slow, kid? He wasn't a Republican. Do you need to show your dumbass proof with links and facts in Whisper to show you him yelling at Trump supporters, calling them fascists? Are you slow? I have not seen this, but you know what I have seen? Every local media coverage on all of his friends from school being interviewed, and every single one of them in unison saying that he was a loner, he was kind of a weirdo, he was a fine student, while simultaneously saying that his family is Trump supporters and he definitely was conservative. Now, I don't know. He was on a BlackRock ad. I'm going to ask you with all sincerity, do you think BlackRock is a liberal institution? No, like for real. Like every single person that was around this kid is like, yeah, he was a conservative. He was a conservative. He's registered the Republican Party, and you're like, no, he was in a BlackRock ad. Yeah, I know. He was in a... I know the BlackRock ad. We watched it on stream. If you think that that has any real connection to his political allegiance, and not simply he was in an ad because he was taking the class of a dude who was running an ad for BlackRock, which, handles teachers' pensions. It was a B2B ad, or it might not have even been a B2B ad, to be real, but it was a fucking BlackRock ad to show like, oh, we take care of the teachers, like, because they control the pensions, and how those pensions are the same BlackRock that's involved in Ukraine and Russia. Oh no. Oh no. B2B is Hasana Brat. No, it means business to business ad. The same people who knows Trump wants to pull out being featured for 3 seconds in a BlackRock ad on teachers' pensions because he happened to be in the classroom does not create this conspiracy that you think is happening, where BlackRock cut an ad 4 years prior with like a 16-year-old in high school that they were gearing up to make the assassin of Donald Trump. Is that what you genuinely think is going on? Like they were like, oh, we found him when he was 16 years old and we knew he would be the perfect killer of Donald Trump. That's why we then made him donate on Joe Biden's inauguration to Act Blue. And then we made him register as a Republican. And we then went and purchased a gun YouTuber's merch. And then we made him take his father's gun and plant himself on top of a rooftop, waiting for the perfect opportunity, knowing full well that inevitably 4 years in the future, Donald Trump would obviously go to his campaign like 30 miles from where he lives. The perfect plan. Do you think that that was what was going on? And that was because BlackRock also, when they cut that ad, knew that Vladimir Putin was going to invade Ukraine, and they hated that, and knew that Donald Trump would inevitably pull out of Ukraine if he were to win. And that's why they had to execute him. The amount of strings that you need to attach in order for this to make sense is so goddamn creative, dude. Respect. You got it. You nailed it.